Berlin, 1938. A physicist stands at the German border, clutching a single suitcase. She's Jewish. The Nazis have just annexed Austria. She has 10 marks in her pocket, the legal limit, and a mind that has just figured out how to split the atom. She makes it across. The discovery she carries in her head will change the world forever. The man who takes the credit will win the Nobel Prize. She will spend the rest of her life in exile, underpaid and forgotten. Her name is Lise Meitner, and she deserved so much better. Lise Meitner was born on November 7, 1878, in Vienna, Austria. One of 8 children in a family that, unusually for the era, believed in education regardless of gender, which sounds progressive. Until you understand what education actually meant for women in Vienna in 1878. Austria didn't allow women to attend public university until 1897. So Meitner, who was obsessed with mathematics and physics from childhood, spent years preparing in secret, studying privately while her male peers walked straight into lecture halls. Then she crammed 8 years of high school curriculum into 2. She passed the university entrance examination in 1901, one of only 4 women to do so that year. In 1906, she became only the second woman in history to earn a doctorate in physics from the University of Vienna. The second, ever, in history. She was 27 years old, and she had already done something almost no woman had ever done. She could have stopped there. She didn't. She moved to Berlin to attend lectures by Max Planck, the physicist who invented quantum theory. Planck had a firm rule: no women. He made an exception for Meitner. One lecture turned into a professional relationship that lasted decades. In Berlin, she connected with chemist Otto Hahn. They wanted to collaborate. There was a problem. The head of the chemistry department refused to allow women into his laboratory. So they gave Meitner a room in the basement, a converted carpenter's shop, no windows, no official title, no salary. She worked there for 2 years. 2 years in a basement, because they didn't want her upstairs. By 1912, things shifted, if only slightly. Meitner and Hahn moved to the newly established Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Chemistry, a real laboratory. Finally, the partnership they built was remarkable. Hahn brought experimental chemistry. Meitner brought theoretical physics. Together, they tackled radioactivity, a field so new, so dangerous, and so poorly understood that many scientists didn't even recognize the health risks yet. Then World War I arrived and tore everything apart. Hahn was drafted into the German military. Meitner volunteered as an X-ray technician for the Austrian army, operating imaging equipment near active front lines. For 2 years. When they both returned to science, scarred by what they'd seen, they got straight back to work. In 1917, they co-discovered protactinium, element 91 on the periodic table. A genuine breakthrough. Then, in 1922, Meitner made a solo discovery, what we now call the Auger effect, the mechanism by which an atom ejects an electron after absorbing radiation. She published her findings. The scientific community noted her work. Then, 2 years later, a French physicist named Pierre-Victor Auger independently discovered the same effect and got his name on it. Forever. Here's the twist. This would not be the last time. By 1926, Lise Meitner held the first full professorship in physics ever given to a woman in Germany. She was at the height of her power, 50 years old, internationally respected, doing the most important work of her career. Then the world fell apart around her. Hitler took power in 1933. Jewish scientists began fleeing Europe. Many of the most brilliant minds of the century scattered overnight. Meitner stayed. Her Austrian citizenship offered a thin layer of protection, and she refused to abandon 30 years of work without a fight. In March 1938, Germany annexed Austria, the Anschluss. Overnight, that protection was gone. Meitner was now a stateless Jewish woman in Nazi Germany. She needed to disappear, fast. She had no visa, no exit papers, no safe passage. It was the physicist Niels Bohr, Nobel laureate, a giant of 20th century science, who helped arrange her escape through a network of sympathetic colleagues. She crossed into the Netherlands. 10 marks in her pocket, the legal maximum. Left behind her laboratory, her books, her instruments, her home. 30 years of accumulated scientific life, abandoned in one night. She eventually settled in Stockholm, Sweden, a country whose language she didn't speak, a research institute that, by most accounts, didn't particularly want her, a salary well below those of her male colleagues. But she never stopped working. Even from exile in Stockholm, Meitner kept her partnership with Hahn alive through letters. Physics problems worked out by post, across international borders, under Nazi surveillance. Then, in late 1938, Hahn sent her a result that made no sense. His team had been bombarding uranium atoms with neutrons. The expected result was a heavier element. That's how nuclear physics was supposed to work. Instead, they kept getting barium, an element roughly half the mass of uranium. By everything Hahn knew, it was impossible. He sent the data to Meitner, because Hahn, for all his brilliance, needed her to tell him what he was actually looking at. Meitner was spending Christmas that year with her nephew, physicist Otto Frisch, in a small Swedish town called Kungälv. And during a walk through the snow, literally a walk through the snow, they figured it out. The uranium atom hadn't absorbed the neutron. It had split in two. Nuclear fission. They sat down and ran the numbers. Using Einstein's E equals mc squared, they calculated the energy released when that nucleus split. The figure was staggering. They were looking at an energy release millions of times greater than any chemical reaction. In February 1939, Meitner and Frisch published the theoretical explanation of nuclear fission. They coined the term. They explained the mechanism. They told the world what had happened and why. The paper landed like a thunderclap. Scientists across the world immediately understood the implications. If you could control a chain reaction of this magnitude, you could build a weapon unlike anything in human history. The Americans came calling. Meitner was personally invited to join the Manhattan Project, the top-secret program to build an atomic bomb. She said no. She wanted no part in building a weapon of mass destruction. Full stop. Her reward? The 1944 Nobel Prize in Chemistry went to Otto Hahn, alone. The citation, for his discovery of the fission of heavy nuclei. His discovery, singular. In his acceptance speech, Hahn mentioned Meitner briefly. She wasn't present. She was in Stockholm, still in exile, still underpaid. The Nobel Committee's internal records, now public, show that Lise Meitner was nominated for the Nobel Prize 48 times. 48. Across both physics and chemistry, over more than 20 years. She never received it. What they said about her instead, Albert Einstein, not a man given to overstatement, called her our Marie Curie. Her scientific peers knew exactly who she was and what she'd done. Element 109 on the periodic table is named Meitnerium. That's how you know how the scientific community felt about the Nobel Committee's decision. They put her name on the periodic table itself. She continued working into her 80s. In 1966, she received the Enrico Fermi Award, one of the highest honors in American science. The first woman to receive it. Recognition, late, incomplete, and long overdue. Lise Meitner died on October 27, 1968, just a few days before her 90th birthday. Her gravestone in Hampshire, England, carries the words written by her nephew, Otto Frisch, a physicist who never lost her humanity. The discovery of nuclear fission, the physics that powered the atomic bomb, that runs nuclear power plants today, that reshaped the 20th century, rests on the work of Lise Meitner. She did her earliest research in a basement carpenter's shop because they wouldn't let her upstairs. She fled her country with 10 marks in her pocket. She solved one of the greatest puzzles in physics by letter, from exile, while the world she'd built crumbled behind her. And when they offered her a chance to weaponize her own discovery, she said no. She was forgotten. Not anymore. Follow Female Obscura for a new extraordinary woman every week. And if this story moved you, share it. Because the best way to unerase someone from history is to say their name.